Hey, how y'all doing out there? Don't answer, I can't hear you anyway. The other day, I got an email from a friend of mine, and he was talking about dealing with a person he knows who he described as a bottomless well of misery and anger. I don't know how you are, but I know people like this, and a lot of people I know people like this. And there's a few people I know who don't know people like this, and I think you're kind of lucky. But the rest of us, kind of know people like this. And I have a real affinity to people like this, to people who are bottomless wells of misery and anger, because I feel like that's where I would have defaulted to if I had not gotten into this Zen practice 35 some years ago. I am kind of bent that way. I don't know if that's a phrase. That sounds a bad phrase, but that's sort of the way I go naturally. And everything that I've found conventionally other than Zen has not worked. Like the idea of trying to replace anger and misery with positivity and good vibes and trying to turn it all into something else hasn't ever worked for me. The only thing that's ever worked for me is facing down my own anger and misery in real time while doing this stupid shikantaza practice. And I do mean stupid because it is the ultimate of stupid kinds of meditations. So that's my default, and I have an affinity for people like that and a kind of love for people like that because that's the way I am. The problem is there's only so much you can do. There are people who are so stuck in misery and anger that, at least for me, there are certain people I've been sort of in the orbit of who I found there was nothing. There was zero I could do for them. And one of the mistakes that people who have a certain amount of compassion for folks like that will do is they'll try. They keep trying and trying and trying. And a lot of these people who have such attachments, they're so attached to misery and anger that they will keep trying to find things to be miserable and angry about. So even if there isn't really, on one hand, there's always something to be miserable and angry about. Just turn on the news or something, you can figure that out. But even in situations where there's nothing like immediately misery-making or immediately angry-making, they'll go and find it. And one of the things I've found in my current position as a public figure, even a sort of bottom-feeding, low-level public figure the way I am, but public figure nonetheless to tens of people out there, is that I become a target of an obsession, that people will obsess on me. And I am aware that even this video right now is being monitored by certain people who are obsessed with finding things about me to get angry and miserable about, who only turn it on to get angry and miserable about it. And that's really weird, because most of the people who I am acquainted with who are bottomless wells of anger and misery, they really actually have legitimate reasons to be angry and miserable. Anybody has legitimate reasons to be angry and miserable, but these are people who maybe more than most have that. And you would think that the thing to do if your life was already full of misery and anger would be not to add more of it. That would be the sensible, logical thing to do. But I think a lot of what happens is, I think maybe it's an attempt to control anger and misery by getting angry at certain specific targets, like me, for one. Or if you're the good-natured friend who tries to work with the endlessly angry and miserable person, they'll glom onto you, and turn their anger and misery on you because you're a safe target. You're the one that won't smack back or something like that. You're the one that won't walk away or whatever. And that's a tough position for anybody to be in. One of the things I've found after a lot of trial and error is that walking away is sometimes the only thing you can do. And I know that's sad and I know that's harsh, but sometimes that's all you can do. But the other thing I've also discovered, for whatever it's worth, is in the Zen tradition, the Zen communal tradition, a lot of people come in who are troubled people. That's the people have this idea that people who come to Zen and are like these like peaceful spiritual people, whatever. That's usually not the case. Not in Zen. People who come to other sort of more fluffy meditations are often those kind of people. The people who come to Zen are often the most miserable people in the world. The people who are most aware of their own misery and their own anger at everything. They come to this practice because it's very austere, or at least that's the image of it. I'm not sure, but you're often encountering people like that. And the way we deal with it in the tradition is we set up boundaries. And that kind of surprises people because they'll say, well, isn't Zen about having no boundaries and, accepting everything? Well, yeah, philosophically it is, but in terms of day-to-day interaction with people, it's like we are doing this. You come into this monastery or this Zen center, and we are sitting down and we are looking at this wall for 30 gosh darn minutes, and that is what we're doing. And we are working on this practice, and we are not listening to your stories of misery and anger, and we are not kvetching with each other about the state of the world and all this. We are going to do this practice. And that's something that I find very powerful, and that's kind of the attitude I generally take. I sit Zazen for those of you out there who are endless, bottomless wells of anger and misery, including you right now who are watching this video to find something to get angry with me about and post a comment. I am doing Zazen for you. Take it or leave it. Leave it, I would prefer. But that's what we do. Another little sort of side note for that, I mentioned that oneness with everything. And people, when they hear that oneness with everything, it's often like, oh, the flowers and the trees and the birds and the bees and the universe and the planets and the stars. Yeah, that's what you're one with, for sure. You're also one with the person who is a bottomless well of anger and misery, because that's you. You're not just the stars and the planets and the galaxies and the wonderful, fairy dust and butterflies and hummingbirds. You are also that person who is the bottomless well of anger and misery. That's in you too. And finding a balance with all of that is what helps. That's been my solution to my own bottomless well of anger and misery problem, is finding the balance between the anger and misery and the awesome beauty and wondrousness of the world, and finding the place where those things meet and where those things intertwine together, because you wouldn't think they would. You think they're opposites, but they're not. Anyway, if you have a bottomless well of anger and misery in your life, there's what little advice I have for you. I hope it helps you a little bit. If you want to help with my anger and misery, you can donate via Patreon and PayPal. Every time I get a little notice, ding, of a Patreon new donor or a new donation from PayPal, I get a little less miserable, so that's nice. That's it for me. Thanks for all your help and support. Really appreciate it. See you later. Have a good day. Bye.